Our artist for tonight, for this show, is Beckyross, and she's going to give us a little talk, and she actually would like us to move with her around the gallery. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Beckyross. I'm the artist that made this artwork, and as Pamela said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a little tour of the show. I'm going to start here, and I'm going to just talk about my art career and my art for a little while, and then I'll start moving you through these works, and then we'll move back to those. But I started doing religious art in 1984 when I started graduate school, and was interested in working with symbols in my artwork. Actually, the situation didn't go over that well in my graduate school, though. I was not going to a religious-oriented school, and guess what the professors wanted to see? They wanted to see me doing things for more purely design reasons and letting the viewer get whatever meaning the viewer wanted out of it. But I'll tell you what I was doing at first. This happens to be a Last Supper, and it's fairly recent work, but in 1984, I was doing some soft pastels that were Last Suppers, and they were original compositions based on the idea of a Jewish Seder. A lot of people believe the Last Supper was a Jewish Seder, and had some Jewish friends, and they took me through that ceremony. We were sitting on the floor, and there were traditional foods, and the prophet Elijah is supposed to be there. So I did this series of very abstracted figures where I had symbols for various saints, and kind of what happened, though, is you have to be a Renaissance art historian to recognize some of these symbols. So for a lot of work I did for a year or so, I was trying to put all these symbols in, but yet the audience I was speaking to, which were really professors that were painters who were critiquing my work, or fellow students, they weren't art historians, they weren't really given the symbols. And what I ended up doing is moving to other sorts of work for the next few years. When I got out of graduate school, though, started working for the Park Service at Jamestown in Virginia. And we would get a lot of reenactors reenacting the 1600s. I was also doing a lot of realistic drawings based on reenactors and historic sites, but then abstracting them in acrylic paintings. My last graduate work had a lot of silhouette figures. It was about figure-ground relationships and relationships with negative space. And I was teaching an art history course part-time at Christopher Newport College, and we were studying Rembrandt. So I got to thinking, wow, you know, Rembrandt has people of the same time period as Jamestown, has this wonderful sense of light, this wonderful sense of figure groups, this great sense of scripture. And one thing he would do, I guess, is, or I guess I'll rephrase this here. One thing I decided I wanted to do was to do a takeoff on his work. What he would do is have all these loose sketches that he would use for paintings or etchings. What I wanted to do was, you know, take these loose gestural works and make something else out of them. And well, I thought I was going to have something from the Rembrandt series here, but turned out we didn't have quite enough room, so I left that out. The first thing I ever did was an acrylic painting. It was based on a Rembrandt sketch of Christ talking to the synagogue elders as a child. And it was blue, pretty much silhouette figures. When I got to Philadelphia, in '89, I moved here because I was working as a park ranger at Independence. And it happened there was a feminist art show going on in House Square. And a lot of my undergraduate work, late undergraduate work, was feminist oriented. And this show was about violence against women. It had a 22 by 22 inch format. And what I ended up making was an oil pastel, so similar media to all these things. And I tried out a technique I'd used as an undergraduate. My professors didn't really like using fluorescent colors, so in a sketchbook for a class, I'd done some things where I put on a base coat of fluorescent crayon and different colors and different spots, and then covered it with cray-paws and dug back into it. And for this feminist show, I did that. It was a figure of a woman on a cross, but I think with her arms lifting up, and it was meant to be a positive image, but I realized this was a great media and a great format. Working full-time, I found that it really wasn't working for me to use paints because it takes so much setup and cleanup time. So what I decided to do was to start working this series that is oil pastel, and now I do all of them on museum board. That's a fairly hard board that's archival. It's usually used for matting or as a separation board between a picture and its backboard. And what I do put a layer of crayon, things like Prang and Crayola crayon, and I usually test them in windows. For instance, I will put patches of the crayon on a piece of paper as a test, tape it to a window, see if it fades, because I'm not trying to use things that fade easily. But I like to use neons, metallic, glitter. They don't really make fluorescent anymore. I've still got some fluorescents. And I think about how I'm going to lay things down. For instance, I'll put different colors as an underlayer depending on what I think I'm going to do in the area. In the series where I've worked with Renaissance masterpieces, I'm usually trying to think of geometry. I often will Xerox the work in black and white and hunt for geometry in it. For instance, I've got a square here and a rectangle here. And in this particular work, it's fairly recent work. It's from the last few years. This was inspired by a lot of things, partly the frame. I've got a friend who is an artist in Reading, and she likes to walk around downtown Reading and find stuff, junk people thrown out. So she happened to find this frame, and of course it was chipped and the velvet was in pretty bad shape. But I had a lot of metallic paint, so I fixed the chips and I painted around all the velvet, and I'd already decided this is the perfect size and shape for a Last Supper. And when I was in graduate school, got this book. It's about the conservation of Leonardo's Last Supper. And this was kind of fun. You've probably studied this in art history, but what happened in Leonardo's work was it started to deteriorate right after he made it, because it's made of oil, but it was on a wall, which is kind of damp and not the best place for oil paint to stick. So when the figure needed patching, they'd end up changing the gesture, the facial characteristics. It changed through time, and so it was interesting to see what Leonardo had intended. For instance, this book